How many more years would the silence stretch, thin and taut as a warp thread, across the rooms of this old teak house? Amara, at 60, often found herself listening to it, a vast, echoing quiet, punctuated only by the distant drone of Chiang Mai traffic or the frantic chirping of geckos after dusk. 10 years since her husband, Somchai, had passed, leaving her with this house filled with his presence. Solid, respectable furniture, framed photos of achievements, the lingering scent of his preferred cigars, and an absence that felt heavier than any object. Her days unfolded in a predictable rhythm, tending the small, overgrown garden where orchids bloomed with defiant vibrancy, preparing solitary meals, the click of her knitting needles, a lonely metronome against the afternoon heat. Her children were threads pulled far away. Preya, her son, a successful financier in the whirlwind of Bangkok, his calls efficient, concerned mostly with the upkeep of the property and her financial security. Her children were threads pulled far away. Priya, her son, a successful financier in the whirlwind of Bangkok, his calls efficient, concerned mostly with the upkeep of the property and her financial Mali, her daughter, studying art history in Melbourne, sent cheerful video messages filled with exotic sights, her empathy buffered by thousands of kilometers and the self-absorption of youth. Respectful, yes. Connected, not in the way her heart sometimes ached for. She was Kunamara, Somchai's widow, a figure of quiet dignity in their quiet soi near the old city. A role she played dutifully, even as the edges of her own self felt increasingly frayed, indistinct. One humid afternoon, sorting through an old camphor wood chest, her fingers brushed against smooth, forgotten rosewood, her old weaving tools. A pang, sharp and unexpected, resonated through her. She remembered the feel of the shuttle in her younger hands, the satisfaction of seeing patterns emerge from chaos, a passion set aside decades ago for the more practical duties of wife and mother. Now only emptiness stretched ahead. Perhaps it wasn't too late to pick up a dropped thread. A neighbour, kind-hearted Pim, mentioned the community centre workshop just off Suthep Road. They have everything, Kunamara. Pottery, painting, even lana weaving. You always had such clever hands. The suggestion lodged itself in Amara's mind, a tiny seed of possibility in the barren soil of her routine. Hesitation warred with a desperate need for something, anything, to fill the echoing spaces. What would people think? A woman her age starting something new, alone. But the silence of the house pressed in, more daunting than potential whispers. Taking a deep breath one Tuesday morning, smoothing down her practical cotton blouse and sin, she walked towards the centre. The workshop buzzed with a cheerful energy that felt alien yet strangely inviting. The air smelled of damp clay, turpentine, and the earthy fragrance of natural dyes. Sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing above vibrant skeins of silk and cotton. Women of varying ages sat hunched over pottery wheels or easels, their chatter punctuated by the rhythmic thud and clatter of looms from a partitioned area. Kun Suri, the centre's coordinator, a woman whose bright eyes seemed to miss nothing, greeted Amara warmly, her smile encompassing but assessing. "Kunamara, how wonderful to see you here. Interested in weaving, Pim told me. We have a lovely group." She gestured towards the looms where several women worked, their hands moving with practiced grace. Amara felt a wave of self-consciousness. These women seemed so adept, so comfortable. Could she possibly fit in? As Kun Suri explained the basics, Amara's gaze drifted. Seated slightly apart, near a window overlooking a small courtyard garden, was a man, perhaps her age, maybe a little older. He wasn't weaving, nor painting. He sat with a sketchbook open on his lap, pencil moving with quiet concentration, seemingly absorbed in capturing the fall of light on a cluster of bamboo. He had a calm, almost scholarly air, dressed simply in a pale blue cotton shirt. Their eyes met briefly, a fleeting, neutral acknowledgement, before he returned to his drawing. Amara quickly looked away, focusing intensely on the intimidating structure of the loom before her, the initial flicker of purpose momentarily overshadowed by the familiar discomfort of being new. Observed. Amara's fingers, initially clumsy, slowly remembered the language of the threads. The tension of the warp, the satisfying slide of the shuttle, the gradual emergence of a simple geometric pattern, it demanded focus, silencing the internal monologue of loneliness for blessed stretches of time. She kept mostly to herself, offering polite smiles but avoiding lengthy conversations, concentrating fiercely on relearning the craft. The man with the sketchbook was often there, sometimes drawing, sometimes just observing the different crafts with a quiet intensity. His name, she learned through overheard snippets, was Chachai. He was, apparently, retired. From what, no one seemed quite sure. He rarely spoke, but his presence was calming rather than intrusive. One afternoon, struggling with a tangled thread, Amara let out a small sigh of frustration. Chachai looked up from his sketching. "Sometimes," he said, his voice soft, unexpectedly resonant, "it helps to loosen the tension further back first, before tackling the knot directly." He didn't move closer, didn't presume, just offered the observation gently. Surprised, Amara tried his suggestion. It worked. She murmured her thanks, feeling a slight warmth spread through her. "You have a good eye for colour," he commented another day, nodding towards the deep indigo and gold threads she was using. "Lana tradition, strong and beautiful." His appreciation felt genuine, focused on the work, not on her. Slowly, tentatively, conversations began. Short exchanges about weaving techniques, the quality of the light that day, the surprisingly good cow soy at a nearby stall. He spoke thoughtfully about architecture, his former profession, she gathered, though he never explicitly stated it, drawing parallels between the structure of buildings and the patterns in weaving. Balance, he mused one afternoon, looking at her work in progress, and the way negative space defines the form. It's the same principle. Amara found herself looking forward to these quiet interactions. He didn't pry, didn't fill the silence with unnecessary chatter. He simply shared observations, listened attentively when she occasionally offered a thought about the garden or a childhood memory sparked by a particular colour. A fragile connection, woven from shared quietude and mutual respect, began to form. The shift was subtle at first. A shared cup of lukewarm tea after the session ended. A suggestion from Chachai: "There's a small cafe by the Ping River, very peaceful. They have excellent Wang Ping coffee if you like it strong." Amara hesitated. Going somewhere with him, outside the neutral space of the centre, it felt like crossing an invisible line. But the image of the quiet river, the thought of conversation uninterrupted by the clatter of looms, was tempting. "Perhaps," she'd murmured, non-committally. Yet, the following week, she found herself agreeing. The riverside cafe was as serene as he'd described. They sat watching the slow drift of water hyacinths, the conversation flowing more easily now, touching on favourite books, changes they'd seen in Chiang Mai over the years, the quiet joys of simple routines. Amara felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years, a sense of being seen not just as Somchai's widow, but as herself. But with the burgeoning happiness came a prickle of anxiety, a familiar shadow of guilt. Was this appropriate? What would Somchai have thought? What would Priya say? She pushed the thoughts away, determined to savour the moment, the gentle companionship. They started meeting occasionally outside the centre, a walk through the shaded pathways of Wat Umong, its ancient tunnels offering cool respite from the sun, or browsing in a quiet bookstore. Each meeting felt both precious and precarious. Back at the weaving centre, Amara sensed a change in the atmosphere. Glances lingered a fraction too long. Conversations hushed slightly when she approached. Kun Sari, while still outwardly pleasant, had a new, knowing glint in her eyes. "Ah, Amara," she'd said one afternoon, her voice pitched just loud enough for others to hear. "Spending much time with Kun Chachai these days? He seems a very quiet gentleman." The implication hung in the air. Amara felt her cheeks flush. She mumbled something non-committal about discussing weaving patterns and quickly turned back to her loom, her hands suddenly unsteady. The whispers, though unspoken directly to her, felt like tiny barbs, reminding her of her place, questioning her right to this unexpected connection. The joy began to taste of fear. The call from Priya came on a Sunday evening, just as Amara was enjoying the scent of rain-washed jasmine from her garden. His voice, usually brisk and businesslike, held an edge she hadn't heard before. "Mom, Kun Pim called Dad's cousin. She mentioned you're seeing someone? From that weaving place." Amara's heart sank. The community network, efficient and inescapable. Priya, it's not. "Who is he, Mom? What does he do?" You have to be careful. There are people who take advantage of older women, especially widows. Is he after money? You need to protect what Dad worked so hard for." The barrage of questions felt like accusations. "His name is Chachai," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "He's retired. We just talk sometimes, share coffee." "Retired? From what? Does he have his own income? A house? Mom, be realistic. This isn't some teenage romance. What will people say? Think of the family's reputation." His words, wrapped in the guise of concern, stung. He saw her only as vulnerable, naive, a potential liability. The conversation ended badly, leaving Amara feeling shaken and diminished. Later that week, Mally's face appeared on her tablet screen, framed by the bright sunshine of an Australian spring. "Mom, Priya called me. He's worried about you. This Kun Chachai. Are you sure you know him well enough? I don't want you to get hurt." Mally's concern felt softer, less accusatory, but the underlying message was the same: doubt, caution, disapproval. Amara felt a familiar weight settle upon her, the crushing burden of expectation, the guilt of potentially disrupting the carefully maintained image of the respectable widow. She started avoiding Chachai's gaze at the centre, making excuses to leave promptly, the pleasure of weaving overshadowed by anxiety. The threads on her loom seemed tangled, the pattern lost. She saw the confusion, the slight hurt in Chachai's eyes when she politely declined his invitation for coffee. The silence in her house, once merely lonely, now felt heavy with judgment, both external and internal. Was this fragile happiness worth the conflict, the potential rift with her children, the whispers of the community? Perhaps Priya was right. Perhaps it was foolish, dangerous even, to reach for something more at her age. Chachai sought her out a few days later, finding her lingering by the entrance of the centre, clearly hesitant to go in. "Kunamara," he began gently, his usual calm tinged with concern. "Is everything all right? You seem distant." Amara couldn't meet his eyes. She mumbled something about being busy, feeling tired. He didn't press, but stood quietly beside her for a moment. "If something is troubling you," he said softly, "perhaps talking about it might help, or perhaps not. But the silence seems heavy today." His perceptiveness disarmed her. Tears pricked her eyes. "My children," she began, the words tumbling out, recounting Priya's accusations, Mally's worries, the weight of expectation. They worry you might take advantage, that it's not appropriate." Chachai listened patiently, his expression unreadable but attentive. When she finished, the silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken fears. Finally he spoke, his voice low and measured. "They are concerned for you. That is understandable." He paused, looking out towards the street. "Perhaps they are right to be cautious. People can carry burdens from the past." He turned back to her, his gaze direct but kind. "My past, Amara, is not uncomplicated. I was an architect in Bangkok, successful for a time." He hesitated, a shadow crossing his face. "But I made mistakes, focused too much on work, neglected other things, other people. Then a project failed badly. A partnership dissolved, acrimoniously. I lost a great deal, not just financially." He didn't elaborate on the specifics, but the implication of significant loss and perhaps personal failure hung in the air. "I wasn't betrayed, not in the way some stories go. My downfall was largely of my own making. Ambition, perhaps arrogance. It cost me dearly." He looked away again. Retiring early, moving here. It was a retreat, a way to find a quieter rhythm, to rebuild something simpler, more honest, within myself. He met her eyes again. "I tell you this not to burden you, but because your children's concerns, while perhaps misplaced in their specifics about my intentions towards you, touch upon a truth. I am not a man without regrets or a past that caused pain. Whether that past makes me untrustworthy now, that is something you must decide." His honesty was stark, vulnerable. It wasn't the confession of a hidden villain, but the quiet admission of a flawed human being. It didn't magically erase her children's warnings, but it shifted the ground beneath them. He wasn't hiding anything nefarious, he was sharing his own brokenness. Amara felt a confusing mix of emotions: fear, empathy, a strange sense of solidarity. He hadn't tried to paint himself as perfect. His quiet life wasn't a deception, it was a conscious choice born from past turmoil. The question now wasn't just about defying her children or society, but about whether she could trust this man, flaws and all, and trust her own judgment. The revelation settled between them, not as a barrier, but as a space for quieter understanding. Amara didn't pull away. Instead, she found herself asking tentative questions, not out of suspicion, but a desire to comprehend the man behind the quiet facade. Chachai answered carefully, sharing glimpses of the pressures of his former life, the lessons learned through failure, the slow process of finding peace in Chiang Mai's gentler pace. He spoke of rediscovering simple pleasures, the satisfaction of a well-drawn line, the taste of ripe mangoes, the changing light on Doi Suthep Mountain. He never blamed others, taking responsibility for his part in his past difficulties. His candor solidified Amara's growing trust. She saw not a potential predator, but a man who, like her, was navigating the complexities of life's later chapters, seeking meaning and connection after weathering storms. Their conversations deepened, moving beyond shared interests into the territory of vulnerabilities and hopes. Amara found herself sharing her own long-buried artistic aspirations, the sense of a life lived largely for others, her fears about the encroaching silence. Chachai listened with an empathy that felt profound, validating her feelings without judgment. "We all carry unfinished patterns, Amara," he said one afternoon, watching her hands move across the loom. "The beauty lies in choosing which threads to pick up again." His words resonated deeply, affirming her tentative steps towards reclaiming her own desires. She began to feel a quiet defiance stirring within her. Why should her children, living their own full lives miles away, dictate the terms of her happiness? Why should the whispers of neighbors define her worth or her choices? Her growing affection for Chachai felt clean, grounding, a quiet joy she hadn't realized she was capable of feeling again. It wasn't the giddy rush of youthful infatuation, but a mature appreciation for shared understanding, gentle companionship, and mutual respect. It felt right. Even amidst the lingering anxiety, a sense of resolve began to take root. This connection, this rediscovery of self through weaving and through Chachai's quiet presence, was hers, and perhaps, just perhaps, she had the right to hold on to it. The Yipeng festival approached, painting Chiang Mai in hues of anticipation. Thousands of lanterns, holding wishes and prayers, would soon float into the night sky, a breathtaking spectacle of light against the darkness. Chachai had hesitantly suggested they go together, find a spot near the Navarot Bridge to watch the main release. "It's crowded," he'd warned, "but beautiful." Amara agreed, her heart fluttering with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. It felt like a public declaration, a step out of the shadows. The day before the festival, Preya arrived unannounced from Bangkok. He walked into the quiet house, his city-sharp suit jarring against the traditional teak wood, his expression set. "Mom, we need to talk. Seriously." He didn't waste time. "I've done some checking. This Chachai, his architectural firm, went bankrupt years ago. There were rumors of bad debts, unhappy clients. He essentially disappeared from Bangkok society. Doesn't that worry you? He comes here, lives quietly, latches onto a respectable widow." Amara stood her ground, though her hands trembled slightly. "He told me about his past, Priya. His business failed, yes. He made mistakes. He's not hiding it." "Mistakes, Mom, this isn't just a mistake. It shows poor judgment, instability. How can you trust someone like that? What if he drags you into his problems? For the family's sake, for Dad's memory, you need to end this." His voice rose, sharp with frustration and ingrained authority. "This is my life," Amara said, her voice quiet but firm, surprising even herself. "My choice," Priya scoffed. "Choice? You're being naive. I forbid you to see him again." The word forbid hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Amara felt a surge of anger, cold and clear. "You don't forbid me anything, Priya. I am your mother, not your child." The confrontation left the air thick with resentment. Priya retreated into stony silence, staying the night, his disapproval a palpable presence in the house. The next evening, the banks of the Ping River thronged with people. Music played, vendors sold food and glowing krathongs. Amara, dressed in a simple silk blouse, felt Priya's disapproving gaze follow her as she slipped out of the house. She found Chachai waiting near the agreed spot, his face anxious until he saw her. As they stood amidst the crowd, Amara spotted Furi and several women from the weaving centre nearby. Their eyes met hers, filled with curiosity. Amara felt a familiar flush of self-consciousness, but then she looked at Chachai's calm profile beside her. The moment arrived. A hush fell over the crowd as the first wave of Komloi paper lanterns fueled by flitting flames were released. They rose slowly, majestically, hundreds, then thousands, transforming the night sky into a silent, drifting river of light. Chachai held out a lantern they had bought. "Shall we?" he asked softly. This was it, the choice. In front of everyone, potentially under the watchful eyes of her community, defying her son's explicit command. She thought of the silent house, the lonely years, the rediscovered joy in weaving, the quiet understanding in Chachai's eyes. Taking a steadying breath, she met his gaze and nodded. Together, their hands brushing, they lit the candle inside the delicate paper. They held it for a moment, a shared, silent wish between them, then released it. It wobbled, caught the breeze, and began its ascent, joining the constellation of hopes drifting towards the full moon. Amara watched it go, a profound sense of peace settling over her. She hadn't shrunk away. She had chosen. Priya left the next morning. The farewell was stiff, strained. He didn't repeat his demands, but his disapproval was a cold wall between them. "Take care of yourself, Mom," was all he said, the words clipped. Amara watched his taxi pull away, feeling not sadness but a quiet liberation. She had stood her ground, spoken her truth. The outcome wasn't perfect reconciliation, but it was an acknowledgement, however grudging, of her autonomy. An uneasy truce, perhaps, but the power dynamic had shifted. Later that day, Malie called. "Mom, Priya told me about the festival. Are you okay?" There was less worry in her voice now, more hesitant curiosity. "I am, Malie," Amara replied calmly. "I'm happy." There was a pause. "He makes you happy?" "Yes, he does." Another pause, then. "Okay, Mom, just be careful, but okay." It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall of disapproval, a willingness to see beyond convention. Amara felt a warmth spread through her chest. Back at the weaving centre, things felt different too. Kunsuri offered a polite, neutral nod. The whispers seemed to have subsided, replaced by a grudging respect, or perhaps just acceptance of the new reality. Amara no longer scanned the room anxiously, no longer flinched at perceived glances. She focused on her loom, on the intricate pattern emerging under her fingers, a complex design of interwoven paisleys in deep jewel tones. It was challenging, requiring patience and precision, much like the life she was now choosing to weave for herself. She and Chachai continued their quiet companionship. They explored hidden temples, shared simple meals at local markets, spent hours in comfortable silence at the Riverside Cafe. They talked about the future, not in grand terms, but in the gentle rhythm of shared days, attending a traditional music performance, trying a new weaving technique together, perhaps even taking a short trip to Lampang. The challenges hadn't vanished. There would still be awkward family visits, lingering community curiosity, the inherent complexities of merging two lives lived independently for so long. But the fear that had haunted Amara had receded, replaced by a quiet confidence, an inner peace she hadn't known she possessed. Months passed, settling into the gentle rhythm of Chiang Mai's cool season. Amara's house no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. Chachai was a frequent visitor, sometimes bringing sketches he'd made, other times just sitting with her in the garden as she worked, reading or simply enjoying the quiet. They respected each other's space, the legacy of long, solitary habits, but the loneliness had evaporated, replaced by the comforting presence of shared understanding. Her weaving flourished. The complex paisley pattern was nearly complete, a testament to her rediscovered skill and patience. She even began experimenting with her own designs, drawing inspiration from temple murals and the vibrant flora around her. Kunsuri, perhaps sensing the shift in Amara's confidence and the undeniable evidence of her talent, asked if she would consider displaying some pieces at the centre's annual exhibition. Amara, who would have shrunk from such attention months ago, found herself considering it seriously. Prayer called regularly, their conversations carefully navigating around the topic of Chachai. The disapproval was still there, an undercurrent beneath the polite inquiries about her health and finances, but the overt pressure had ceased. He seemed to have accepted, albeit reluctantly, that his mother was not going to be managed. Amara understood his concern came from a place of love, however misguided, and she met his formality with gentle firmness, occasionally mentioning Chachai naturally in conversation, refusing to keep her happiness hidden. Malie's calls were warmer. She asked about Chachai sometimes, listened to Amara's descriptions of their outings, and even laughed when Amara recounted a shared amusing incident. The distance allowed Meli perhaps a clearer view of her mother's contentment. One afternoon, sitting with Chachai by the river, watching the sun dip behind Doisuthep, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple, Amara felt a profound sense of gratitude. It wasn't a dramatic, Hollywood ending. It was something quieter, more authentic. Two people, marked by life and loss, finding solace and companionship in their later years, brave enough to choose connection over convention. Chachai reached over and gently touched her hand, his fingers calloused from years of drawing and, more recently, attempting pottery at the centre. "A beautiful pattern," he murmured, looking not at the sky, but at her face, his eyes reflecting the fading light and a deep, quiet affection. Amara smiled, a genuine, untroubled smile that reached her eyes. The threads of her life, once tangled and frayed, were being woven into something new, not erasing the past, but integrating it into a design richer, more complex, and ultimately more beautiful for the choices she had dared to make. The silence was no longer empty. It was filled with peace. Amara, after much deliberation and gentle encouragement from Chachai, had agreed to display 3 pieces: the intricate Lana Paisley shawl,